Assalamu alaikum. This is Usman from Usman Code. API testing is very important and must have these days. How to test APIs using Postman. We will going to see this today. To test the API, I already developed an API and there is another series which is in progress and I will share its link in the description. You can follow that one if you are interested to develop an API, a RESTful API using ASP.NET 8. I will share that link. You can follow from there. And for the testing point of view, I am starting this Postman series from today. To start with, I will first write some test against my get API endpoint. And you can see that the endpoint is here, API slash home, and it's returning list of objects at the moment, only one record we have at this time. ID is 24 and Usman code 02 is the name. So this is a user API. I will update the name later. So to test that one, we can use the URL from here. And this is RESTful API collection and I made this one public and I will share its link in the description as well. You can find it under my Usman code workspace. Okay, so we have that collection here, RESTful API CRUD, and we can add a new request here, and that will be a GET request. So at this point, there is no authentication applied on this endpoint, so we will be focusing on the test cases based on the headers and responses. We will apply the authentication later on. All right, I can name it get users, and this is not this one. This is my URL. All right. And as soon as I click send, we can see we are getting that object in the Postman response, which is good. So we have to focus on tests. So this is the main agenda of this series. So how to write test against Postman requests in Postman collection. So first of all, we will be focusing on the status, the response status, right? So if you go to the test tab, you can see there are a lot of templates already listed here. We can choose from there at this time. We can start from, let's say, status code is 200. I will click it and now we have that test here. So what it's doing, it's checking if the status is 200, then that test will be passed, right? So we can update this description here and API is good, returning 200. All right, I can save this one and as soon as I click send, now in this test tab in the response, we are getting the results as well. So our test is passed. We can see that. Let's say we are expecting 201, which is the case of post when we will be creating a user. In this case, we will try and we will have that failed result for this test, just fine, which was expected. So that is the first test we should have. The status is 200. The endpoint is returning 200. So what should be the next test for a get endpoint? First is 200 and we can also check that status string. So in the case of 200, we should get OK like this. And if we now try, we will have both tests passed. We are getting 200 and the status code name has string OK this way. Okay, both tests are getting passed, which is good. What should be the next possible basic test against our get endpoint? This one. We can also apply the time that in what possible time our API should respond to check that API is healthy, right? So sometimes an endpoint get takes too much time, so that is not good. So that should be covered in our test suite. So with that mind, I will say that this is the automation test suite going to be developed and we will be automating this script later on. But to start, we are just running those script manually at this time. Okay, so this test is to see if the response is coming within 200 milliseconds, right? Okay, let me save and run. Yes, it's coming within 200 millisecond. What if I say 20 millisecond? what will happen? So for the case of 20 milliseconds, we can see that it took 82 milliseconds. So most probably, possibly this test will fail. Let's see. It's still getting, oh, 18 milliseconds, which is good. If I try again, it's getting within 20 milliseconds, which is good. Let's say 2 milliseconds. What will happen then? For the case of 2 milliseconds, yeah, we are getting that test failed, which is not an ideal, time limit. It should be between 100 milliseconds, around 100 milliseconds. So let's say it should respond within 100 milliseconds. I can update the test description as well. And let's try again. Yeah, we're getting all these tests passed, which is good. So this is the first video around Postman test series. And we have added three tests against our get endpoint, which is returning us list of users. All right, that is fine for this time. And how to run those tests? Not through scripts. We will take care of the automation part later in the same series. But how to run that test multiple times or set of tests within a collection multiple times? Let's touch upon this point as well. If we go to our collection and these three dots option, we have an option run collection. And as soon as we click on this one, we will have the runner view start appearing, which is what we were required. Okay, run manually. Let's go with this default option this time. Iteration, how many times we want this collection to be executed. Let's say we want this one to be executed for 10 times. And at the moment, we only have one request, which is fine. We will be keep building this collection, and in every episode, we will be running those tests through this collection runner to see the results. Let's ignore the data this time. Persist response for a session. We don't need this one. Let's go with all the default options, except these iterations, and run this collection. So we have 10 results returned from that runner, and we can see if we view the summary. So there were three tests against that single request, and that request has been executed for 10 times, which means 20 results. So which means 30 results. So our results are passed, which is good. So environment, we don't have environment at the moment. We will see later on in this series what are the environments. We run 10 iterations. It took 1 second and 337 milliseconds. There were 30 tests in total, and average response time was 14 milliseconds, which is good. So that was all for this video. We have set up a request, a collection, added three tests against that get endpoint, and we have executed that collection through test runner within Postman. In our next video, we will be adding few more tests against the same request, some advanced tests, and we'll see the result in the same way. So stay tuned and see you in the next one.